Hi, I'm Erik Jones, and you're listening to Verse by Verse. One of my favorite books in the Bible is Paul's letter to the Philippians. It's filled with timeless and practical instruction and doctrinal material. But there's a verse in the final chapter that has always stood out to me as a bit different, because it deals with a very specific situation between two members of the Philippian congregation nearly 1,965 years ago. But does that mean there's nothing for us to learn from it? It's found in Philippians 4 verse 2. Let's read it. I implore Euodia and I implore Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Here's what we can deduce from this short verse. In the Philippian congregation, located in eastern Macedonia, there were two prominent female members, Euodia and Syntyche. Paul had received a report that they were having some sort of feud. Now, we don't know what it was about, but for some reason, they couldn't get along. It doesn't seem to be over a doctrinal issue or a situation where one was clearly right and the other was clearly wrong. Paul doesn't side with either. He simply says, be of the same mind. In the next verse, Paul continues, and I urge you also, true companion, help these women who labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. Here we get a hint at why this dispute was so significant that Paul decided to address it in his letter. Both these women labored with him in the gospel. In other words, they were prominent servants in that congregation and had previously worked together to assist Paul when he was there. He loved both of them, and it pained him to see them feuding publicly. For the spiritual health of these two women and the congregation, this conflict needed to be reconciled. Now, the interesting thing about these two verses is that nowhere in any of Paul's letters are we told whether they ever resolved the conflict. We certainly hope they did and got back to serving the congregation together. Now, in the introduction, I contrasted Paul's words to these two women with the more timeless doctrinal and practical material in the book. But are there actually timeless lessons we can draw from this situation? Since the entirety of the Bible is inspired by God, we shouldn't dismiss anything in it as being irrelevant today. With that in mind, let's consider three lessons we can derive from this situation. Number one, sometimes converted Christians disagree and don't get along. Now, that shouldn't be a shock to hear. But nowhere in Paul's words does he question the conversion of either of the two ladies. In fact, in verse 3, he implies that they were both written in the book of life. Now, that isn't saying that feuding with a fellow believer is absolutely acceptable. It is not at all acceptable. Paul knew it was spiritually essential for them to get this worked out. But he didn't condemn them for having a disagreement. Point number two. Division between two usually affects more than just two. One reason Paul addressed this directly in his letter was the damage he knew it could cause to the congregation if left unresolved. One major problem that can occur in a group when two members are so prominently at odds is that others start taking sides and forming camps, and before you know it, the division has spread from two to the entire group. That's why it's so important, for the sake of a congregation, or any group, that conflicts like this get resolved sooner rather than later. And point number three, the goal should be reconciliation, not mere coexistence. Paul's admonition to the two ladies was not just be civil. No, he urged them to be of the same mind. In other words, restore the relationship and be united once again. Don't settle for just coexisting. Now, for that to happen, both parties have to equally desire reconciliation and work at it. And again, we hope they did. And this is really the primary and main lesson I want to focus on from Paul's words to Euodia and Syntyche. Do all you can to make reconciliation, peace, and unity happen. Don't let feuds linger on, and don't settle for just being civil. Instead, put the work into reconciling the relationship and being of the same mind in the Lord.
Verse by Verse is a Life, Hope, and Truth podcast. Check out the show notes to find more free content, like videos, articles, and booklets in our Learning Center.